My name is Chuck. I graduated from the University of California, Berkeley in 2016. My college experience overall was genuinely great. I was part of a fraternity, I kept my studies in check, and I spent just the right amount of time meeting girls. I'm still close with a lot of my old fraternity brothers to this day, and I recently got engaged to my fiancée Rosie, who I also met at Berkeley. But if you had asked me what I thought of Berkeley back when I was a freshman, I can promise you my answer would have been a completely different story. What I'm about to share was one of the main reasons I was never particularly driven or ambitious back in high school. The Berkeley environment was completely foreign to me, and being surrounded by so many self-described high achievers felt genuinely strange. As a freshman, I was quickly swept up in the frenzy of career planning and mapping out the next 30 years of your life at 18 years old. Ridiculous looking back, but that was just the culture of the school at the time. If you wanted any shot at breaking into the business world, having a polished LinkedIn profile wasn't optional, it was expected. I can still remember the stress of trying to craft this professional image online, as if my entire future hinged on which people I connected with and which skills I had listed. Regardless, I checked all the boxes and started my search for a summer internship. It wasn't long before my inbox lit up with a message that actually felt meaningful. To my genuine surprise, a prestigious business firm had reached out expressing interest in my profile. And it wasn't one of those generic automated messages either. The way it was written made it clear this had been crafted specifically for me. I read it probably 6 times before I finally wrote back, and after a brief back and forth over about a day, I was invited to a first-round interview. I spent hours researching the company, so I'd know what I was walking into, and I ran through every sample interview question I could find to prepare myself. Shortly after, I got a message from a man named Armin Slawinski. I will never forget that name for as long as I live. He introduced himself as my interviewer, and naturally the first thing I did was look him up. But excitement quickly turned to confusion. I searched LinkedIn thoroughly, expecting to find his profile and get a sense of who I'd be meeting. There was nothing. No professional footprint anywhere, no social media presence, absolutely nothing. I shrugged it off and figured maybe he just valued his privacy. Armin and I agreed on a day and time, and he sent me the location for the interview. When I looked it up on my phone, it turned out to be a random coffee shop in Oakland. That's when the confusion really started to set in. Why would an interview be held all the way in Oakland? Berkeley had plenty of coffee shops and perfectly suitable spots for something like this. But the address looked normal enough online, so I didn't push it too far. The day before the interview, I mentioned the whole situation to my friend Riley. He was even more skeptical than I was and told me point blank that something seemed off. I agreed with him, but figured it was still worth pursuing given the opportunity. He asked how I was planning to get there, and I told him I was going to Uber. He offered to drive me since he didn't have anything going on. I thanked him and took him up on it. Looking back, I might not even be here telling this story if he hadn't made that offer. The next day at 4 in the afternoon, Riley pulled up to my dorm. I was honestly pretty nervous since this was one of my first real interviews. I got in and we headed out. About 20 minutes later, I had him drop me off on the street since I didn't want to show up to an interview being dropped off by a friend. I thanked him and he offered to stick around and wait. I asked if he was sure, and he just smirked and pulled a big bag of weed out of his dashboard. That was all I needed to know. I shut the door and started walking the couple of minutes to the location. I stopped dead in my tracks. I looked up, and standing in front of me was a literal construction site. No coffee shop, no businesses. The entire surrounding area looked either closed off or completely private, nothing residential at all. I double-checked my phone and confirmed I was in the right spot. The whole block must have been recently demolished, and so recently that Google Maps hadn't even caught up yet. I pulled out my phone to call Riley, but before I could, a booming voice rang out from behind me. "Chuck," a deep voice called out. I spun around and came face to face with an absurdly tall man dressed in an expensive-looking black suit. My first instinct was relief. Thank God, I thought, grateful that this hadn't turned out to be some kind of setup. His presence was commanding, though oddly out of place given the rundown surroundings. I also noticed the car he was standing next to, a matte black Bentley. He walked toward me with a look of mild confusion on his face. We shook hands, and when I brought up the construction site, he said he was just as surprised as I was. He furrowed his brow, put his hand to his chin, and said, "You know what, why don't we find somewhere else? Get in," motioning toward the Bentley. He walked back to the car and called over his shoulder that the front seat was all mine. Without another word, he got in and shut the door. I followed, walking around the car to get to the passenger side and taking a moment to admire it. I couldn't help but glance into the back seat as I passed. I expected to see the kind of beautiful leather interior you'd find in a Bentley. Instead, what I saw sent a chill straight through me. Lying flat on the floor of the back seat, partially hidden in the shadows, was a man, and in his hand was something long and metal. Panic exploded through me. I turned away from that car and ran faster than I have ever run in my entire life. I heard the man shout my name from behind me, but I didn't look back for even a second. Then I heard the one sound I was dreading most: screeching tires. I shot a glance over my shoulder and saw the Bentley turning around, now pointed in my direction. I had to think fast. There was no way I was outrunning a car, and there was no open space around me, just an endless stretch of streets in every direction. I could feel the terror coursing through every part of my body. I hit the next intersection and had to make a split-second decision. Left or right? Logic told me to go left since it was the closer turn, but my feet made the call before my brain could. I sprinted across the street to the right and tore down the road. I knew I had maybe 10 to 20 seconds before the car would be on me. Then, almost like something out of a movie, one of the buildings ahead of me had a fire escape with a ladder that looked just low enough to reach. With every bit of strength I had left, I launched myself upward and grabbed onto it. I had never done a pull-up in my life, but in that moment my mind was operating on pure survival instinct. I pulled myself up and kept climbing. The Bentley came screaming around the corner and stopped in the street directly in front of the building. I couldn't see the driver from where I was, but I knew he was looking up at me. There was nothing else I could do. If they decided to come up after me, I would just have to deal with it. The next minute felt like it lasted an hour. The car sat there completely still. Then it pulled away, accelerated down the street, turned left, and disappeared. I never saw it again, that I could barely breathe. I pulled out my phone and called Riley, practically screaming at him, trying to explain what had just happened. I stayed up on that fire escape until he tracked me down. I climbed in, and we drove away in complete silence. In the aftermath, I basically blocked the whole thing out and refused to talk about it with anyone, including Riley. As far as I was concerned, it hadn't happened. But no matter how hard I've tried to bury it, there are moments like right now where every single detail comes rushing back, and I'm reminded of what very easily could have been the last day of my life.